It's a relatively short portion, and it is noted for two things. One is it begins the description of the Ner Tamid, which is one of the first things you teach a kindergarten class or first grade class on the tours of the temple. You show them the Ner Tamid. So we're going to look a little bit at that. It's also a Torah portion that is one of the only, no, it is the only Torah portion in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The only one in which the name Moses does not appear. Now he's referred to as you, but he is not mentioned by name. And we can talk a little bit about that, its relationship to Purim. And I've mentioned that because on Thursday night of this week, just a couple more nights, we have Erev Purim, and we'll have the reading of the Megillah Esther. And the parallels between this text of Tetzaveh and Megillat Esther, I think, are interesting. At least I thought they were interesting, which is why I sort of put some text together to sort of heighten the connection. So I hope you dig it. As we're about to embark in Torah study, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kedeshanu v'Tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe. You've sanctified us with mitzvot, and you've commanded us to engage with words of Torah. Mark and Janet, good to see you too. So before I go to the text, anything people want to share? Did you know that Tetzaveh was the only Torah portion without Moses?
No.
So no. A fun fact. Fun fact.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I tutor a young man in Israel, and we were on this morning, and he was telling me he's going to be fasting on Thursday.
Right. The fast of Esther.
Fast, yes. And okay, what's the historical or traditional background in that?
Yeah, just read in the book of Esther. It says, as she was preparing to get that courage up to go in to visit Achashverosh and to say, hey, I need to meet with you because there's a danger, right? And the fact is, because of his position as king of this enormous realm, one did not just walk in to the king and say, I need to talk to you. You had to go through channels, even though you were the queen, you had to go through channels. And so she was hesitant. That's when Mordecai said, look, yeah, I know there's a danger here, but maybe that's exactly why you are here. And if you don't stand up for us, God will send someone else, but you now have the opportunity to do it. So he sort of gives her the zutz and the inspiration and the pep talk. And she says, okay, I will. But you and every other Jew throughout Persia has to have a fast. You have to fast and totally spiritually devote yourself so that this is a successful mission. And in that, from that initial experience, then there is the tradition of fasting before Purim.
Thank
How's
you.
that?
Great.
Yeah, I'm not fasting.
Me either.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to Tetzaveh. Good. So the Markman rule is in effect. So we're just going to look at the very first line of Exodus, chapter 27. Chapter 27 only has two verses before we get to it's verse 20 and 21 before we get to chapter 28. I'm going to mute somebody who's got something going on in the background. Anybody know? Good. So it says, "V'ata tetzaveh et bnei Yisrael v'yichu elecha shemen zayit zakatit lamaor lehalot ner tamid." And this is where we get the expression of a ner tamid. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling the lamps continuously. So we refer to the Ner Tamid as a noun, as this is an eternal light, as if there could be a light that is eternal. But we know nothing's eternal. The groups that I bring through, especially the young students or adults who are learning Introduction to Judaism, someone will have told them that that's a Ner Tamid, that's the eternal light. But there's nothing eternal. Not even our own sun that lights up our solar system. So there's always some wise kid who will ask, well, Rabbi, what happens when the light bulb goes out? And I'm pretty sure that 55 years ago, I was that kid at 7 years old going through as the first grader, right? And the answer is, well, you get up on a ladder and you put in a new bulb, right? When the power goes out or when the light bulb goes out, you change it. So it's not an eternal light. And so the idea is rather that it is continuously lit, i.e. we have it burning all the time. But you'll see originally that was not the case at all. It was rather to be lit naturally only during the evening time when there was no other light. So Rashi and the Midrashim take off on this too. Beautiful little teaching here from Tanchuma. So Alan Markman, since I gave you a shout out earlier, would you go ahead and read this passage? Is that large enough for you?
Yes, I would be happy to. And thou shalt command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure olive oil beaten for the light. The Israelites declare, Master of the universe, it is stated, by thy light shall we see light. Yet you commanded us to kindle lights before you. Rabbi Isaac related an anecdote about a house filled with lighted torches. The master of the house told his servant, light some lamps for us in the courtyard. But the house is fully lighted, he replied. Why do you bid me to light lamps in the courtyard? He answered, do it so that the servants will have light.
And it's a beautiful little teaching. So when you hear that, what impression do you have? What lesson can you bring from Tanchuma?
I think it means that everybody is important, and you don't just think about yourself. You have to think about the workers.
Very nice, very nice. What else? What is Tanchuma trying to do? What analogy are they trying to draw from lighting a menorah in the Holy of Holies in the inner sanctum of the temple?
I would say if you're going to be a light unto the nations, you better light up the nations.
Okay, very good. I like that. That's very good. Yay. Go ahead, Arnie.
Yeah, I mean, in continuing with that, light is always considered, contrast to darkness is light is not. It's light is enlightenment. It's therefore, yeah, it's not enough to light up your house. You've got to light up the world that you had, or at least light up your courtyard.
Good. So in the ancient cultures, specifically in Hellenistic culture of the Romans and earlier the Greeks, they would have the Vestal virgins. What were the Vestal virgins in charge of doing?
Taking care of the temple.
What specifically in the temple were they to make sure was always tended?
Oh, I guess the lights. I always thought they were just the cleaning ladies. But...
Right? No. They had a very important role. They were making sure that the hearth, the light, the fire never went out. And in the fancier of the homes, not necessarily in every home, but in the fancier of homes, they would also have a hearth that would never go out. And so it was a very important thing. So the light then became almost symbolic of the presence of the deity for them. right? And what Tanhuma, and this is how I'm taking it. What Tanhuma is saying is that the menorah here is not for God. God is the creator of all light. That's the first thing God created. Or let there be light. So God doesn't need us to light this menorah every evening so that God could see, but rather the light is for us. And the shift there is radical. We don't keep a hearth to represent God's presence because God doesn't need a hearth there to be present with us. We have this place, both physically, this Mishkan, in which God dwells, but also in our heart, in our soul, there's a presence of God. That light is for us, right? The homeowner says, I've got plenty of light. That's not the problem. God is the homeowner. There needs to be light for my people, for my workers, for my servants, for everyone else. So I thought it was a sweet. Go ahead, Mark.
When I learned physics in college, it just struck me that when God created light, he created the limits of the universe. You can't go faster than light, and you can't escape the rules that apply to it.
I love that. That is very good. That is so cool. Yay, thank you. Of course, in Star Trek, they go faster than the speed of light, but that's a different story.
I always think of the light, and you light the lights to remind you of God.
But again, we don't light lights for God.
Right.
We light the lights for
Yeah,
us.
that God is there to remind
Well, for
us.
us. We need the light. I had the yard site of my father, and so on Sunday night, I light that light. Is that light for God? Why am I lighting that light?
You recall your father.
Right, but it's for me to say that there's a spirit that goes on, right? Anyway, so a lot of symbolism that's involved there, I think, is quite nice. And this next passage is also beautiful from Shemot Rabbah. Anybody else would like to read that? Mark or Lori?
I can.
Thank you.
And thou shalt command the
Oh, I'm
children
sorry.
of Israel.
That's right here, right? A sighted person.
Oh, I was reading the other one over again. Okay. A sighted person and a blind person were walking together. The sighted person said, "Come, and I will be your guide," which enabled the blind person to walk. When they entered the house, the sighted person said to the blind person, "Go and light the candle for me and provide me with light so that you should no longer feel obliged to me for having accompanied you. Therefore, I said to you to light the candle."
Right. So I thought that was really cool because in that darkened room, when I am outside and I can see, I can guide the blind person, right? But when I'm in the darkened room, I'm at a loss. I am blind, but the blind person sort of knows how to work through darkened rooms, does so all the time. So in that case, the sighted person was able to say, you know what, you light the light now for me, because that'll make it, you know how important you are, i.e. it's that by that reciprocal action makes it so that you're not always feeling beholden, rather now I too will be beholden to you. But that was very, very sweet. Unless you hated it. All right, no comments, right? I liked it. Okay, I can't help it. So here's Rashi taking on the word tamid. Now we are translating it continually. Sometimes it's regularly, and you're going to see in a second for that second verse what it means, but rather it's something that we do every night as described in the term, and it relates tamid as it's used for other things in the temple, like for instance, the sacrificial offering, the burnt offering. So here's that second verse of the conclusion of chapter 27. Alan, go ahead and read that if you don't mind.
Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain which is over the ark of the pact, to burn from evening to morning before Adonai. It shall be a dew from the Israelites for a time throughout the ages.
Good. So here we can see that it's not, the idea here was not to have a light that goes, that is eternal, but rather it is specifically Aaron and his sons shall burn it every evening into the morning, which makes sense. That's when you need the light. Now, that evolved in time, and the exact moment of its evolution, it can't be specified exactly, but sometime perhaps after the Second Temple period, the tradition was not to have that Ner Tamid that we have in the synagogues lit just in the evening, but rather to have it burn all the time. Now, anthropologically, you might say, well, wait a minute, didn't just borrow that from the Greeks, the Romans, the Hellenistic culture, and then later on the Byzantine culture, where they would have a light burning all the time? And it may have been that we were influenced by those dominant cultures. Perhaps also it was seeing that, when Titus destroyed the temple and brought back all of the temple vessels, including the menorah, back to Rome. His father, Vespasian, was the emperor, and Titus was the conqueror, right? So they had this huge parade. It was the biggest military parade in Roman history. And by the way, where is that Arch of Titus? Where is that?
Is it in Egypt?
No. The Roman. It's in Rome. But who's been to Rome?
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the Arch of Titus?
Is it at St. Peter's?
Nah, it's right outside the Colosseum. And why was it built right by the Colosseum? The message is that from the spoils of Judea, this is what we built. The Colosseum was built from the spoils of Judea, and specifically of Jerusalem, as they ransacked the city. And if you go into Rome, now there's an old Takana that says a Jew should not go under the Arch of Titus, because that's how the parading army went through as a way of celebrating this victory against Judea. They even minted coins, Judea Captiva, celebrating the destruction of Judea and Jerusalem. But if you look at the frieze, and you go to Google it, right, you can see that they're carrying out the menorah and other instruments, including the fire pan, the incense pan, and other instruments from the temple that they had just ransacked. And an old plaque and writing etched around the Colosseum was that this was built from the spoils of Judea. So another fun fact, if you ever get to Rome, and it just brings us to the question, when will we ever be able to travel anywhere? But one of the places I do hope to get to, besides Israel this fall, October, God willing, but I want to get back to Italy. I love Italy, and it's fascinating. But you can see there the menorah that they brought out from the temple, and this light that they carried out, this lamp menorah that they carried out, maybe because it was stolen. And one of the features that the Romans had, we're stealing your light, we're stealing your hearth, we're stealing that flame that you perpetuated, we're snuffing it out, right? We're taking that away. And by us lighting a Ner Tamid, not just in the evening in our synagogues, but all the time, you go into the synagogue, morning, noon, or night, they'll find that light burning. So we're not exactly sure where it was traced to, but it probably was in reflection of the efforts by the Romans to snuff out the light.
When you get back to Italy, don't miss the gelato. Florence.
All right, back to the gelato. Okay, all right. Well, back to the gelato. All right, so we're going to go now just the very beginning of chapter 28, because it's going to go into the garments of the Kohen Hagadol. Now, the priests of the regular Kohanim, they would have linen garments, but the Kohen Hagadol would have a special ma'il, special robe, and they have the choshen, the breastplate, and he would have the ephod, this little pocket vest kind of thing, in which there would be the urim and the tumim, and all of these are starting to be described here in this week's Torah portion, Tetzaveh, and it's going to be described in some detail later on as well. Why is that interesting? Because at the very beginning of the book of Esther, what does Achashverosh do? He has a banquet and he starts to wear all of his finery. And the rabbis say, what was that finery that he was using? And so there's a relationship of Tetzaveh. Now, again, this thing of Tetzaveh, Moses is not mentioned. In the book of Esther, who's not mentioned?
God.
God. Now, there's one, sometimes somebody will say, oh, that's the only book in the Bible in which God's not mentioned. Well, that's not true. God's not mentioned in the Shir Hashirim and the Song of Songs either, but that's neither here nor there. So it's that though God is not mentioned in Purim, in the book of Esther, though God's not mentioned in Shir Hashirim, God's presence is quite evident. And same thing for Moses. Moses is not named, and yet it's you command, you instruct Aaron and his sons to do the following. So Moses is referred to, but just not by name. Perhaps also that's the same idea, if you want to take that metaphor a little bit further, that a flame can be snuffed out by a bully, a tyrant, or an anti-Semite, or whomever. A flame can be snuffed out, but that doesn't mean its light stops glowing. It will still be there. We just have to recognize it. It's there even when it's not so evident. So you guys are getting all these sermons. So we're going to look at, here's the garments, and we'll get to this other passage. So we don't go to that. So here's the passage, just 7 verses or so, the beginning of chapter 28. Who would like to read a little Torah about the various garments? And it's hard to picture, and yet if you go to any website or whatever, they'll have plenty of illustrations of the various garments that the high priest would wear. Who would like to read this?
I'll read.
Thank you, Alan.
You shall bring forward your brother Aaron with his sons from among the Israelites to save me as priests, to serve me as priests. Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, make sacred vestments for your brother Aaron for dignity and adornment. Next you shall instruct all who are skillful, whom I have endowed with the gift of skill, to make Aaron's investments for consecrating him to serve me as the priest. There are the vestments they are to make: a breastplate, ephod, robe, a fringed tunic, headdress, and a sash. They shall make those sacred vestments for your brother Aaron and his sons, for the priests to service to me. They therefore shall receive the gold and blue, purple and crimson yards, and fine linen. They shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and fine twisted linen worked into the designs. It shall have.
It shall
have
two shoulder pieces.
Two shoulder pieces attached. They shall be attached at its two ends, and the decorated band that is upon it shall be made like it, of one piece with it. With it, gold of blue, purple, crimson yarns, and of fine twisted linen. Then take the lazuli stones and engrave them on the names of the sons of Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other stone, in order of their birth.
Great, thank you so much.
You're
So
welcome.
what Rashi's going to say real quick is that on the 2 stones, the names were written. They're written in what's birth order, but basically it was written in an order, not only in an order, but also chaser, written without the vowels, without a yud, without a vav in some of the names, in order to make it so that on each stone there were a total of 25 letters. So just a little aside that he has. I'll get through this one. On the 2 stones, just make sealed engravings, the work of lapidary, on the names of the sons of Israel, having bordered them with frames of gold, attached the 2 stones to the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones for remembrance of the Israelite people whose names Aaron shall carry upon his 2 shoulder pieces for remembrance before Adonai. Again, though Aaron, and then one day whoever is his successor as the Kohen HaGadol, will be wearing this fancy garment, he's carrying with him not only on his shoulders the names of the various tribes of Israel, but on his choshen, on his breastplate, there again would be the names of the tribes of Israel as well. So the role is not in any way to elevate Aaron, to distinguish him above all the others, but rather the hope was to see his role as representing all the people. So on his breastplate, on his shoulder pads, on his shoulders, were engraved in these stones were the names of the tribes that he represents. Also, it is important to note that these priestly garments were only worn when the priest was performing his sacred duties. When he went to Costco to do some shopping or wherever he was going, he was to take those garments off. You don't walk around with your priestly garments on. Those are reserved for very special purposes. So now we're going to shift over to the book of Esther. And the passage I think is pretty fascinating. But before we do, I'll make sure to see if we have any questions or thoughts.
It seems to me that perhaps the military took the design of this tunic for their uniforms, with the epaulets on the shoulders and the stuff on the breastplate. That's how the military does their stuff.
You know, that is really fascinating. Of course, there were military uniforms, in different cultures. So I don't know, again, anthropologically, where they can trace it. But most certainly, the uniform did designate this person as a leader. Who here is a Mason? Really? We have no Masons?
I don't think you're supposed to reveal that you're a Mason.
You most certainly do. You wear that silly hat and everything.
The ring.
Get in your temple.
And the ring, and you have it all over. My daddy and my grandpa, Alav Shalom, they were both Masons. We have a Masonic lodges that some of which are filled with Jews. Of course, Wendy, go ahead. But you have to unmute though, Wendy.
The ex-husband was a Mason, his father was a Mason, and his father's father was a Mason.
Right.
But that was on that side, not my side.
On that side. So
I'm familiar with that.
But it was quite popular in the back. Michael, please.
Yeah, my father was also a Mason.
Yeah.
So, I went to a couple of other meetings. Dad invited me, etc. And it's a little old-fashioned. I mean, people aren't. Some of all the old clubs, the Lions Club, the Order of Eagles and stuff, which were very, very important. Even B'nai B'rith for men and women used to be huge. Not so much anymore, but who knows? It could evolve. Regardless, they are very their rites, their teachings really go into great detail about the construction of the temple, and of course a little bit about the garments of the priests as well. What is one of the things that they put on If you've been to, who's been to a funeral where there was a Masonic presentation? So what do they put on the coffin?
They have these white linen, like they almost look like aprons.
That's exactly.
They're not robes.
Right.
It's in lieu of like what we would say a sheitel, but it's I don't know. I never went up and touched one. I saw it.
It is very much an apron. And although the ephod was a little bit higher on the chest, it has a ritual purpose. And I don't know if it was considered to be some of the garment from what a carpenter would wear, i.e. the builders of the temple, or of a priestly role. So I haven't got it. Maybe someone else knows. That's about the extent of my Masonic information and knowledge. But there are those who are perpetuating this these traditions. So let's get to this.
This is trivia. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I was going to say, back in the 50s, Jackie Gleason belonged to a Mason type organization. I forget which one it was, and they wore a hat with the tail in the back, and they would.
Yeah, the ones with a hat are usually Shriners, and a Shriner is a specific order of the Masonic tradition.
It was the Moose, the order. I think it was the Moose Lodge or something.
Oh, that's when he was. Oh, that's in his show. I thought you were talking about Jackie Gleason, the person, and not the character on the Honeymooners.
There was also the Knights of Pythias had a like an elevated group called the Dokies, and they also wore the hat, the fez. You know,
very cool.
Okay. So Gleason had a tail in the back. They would wave it for some reason. I forget why.
Just to make fun, I suppose. So let's look. Okay,
I think Rabbi Rheins let's get back. Rabbi Rheins must have seen replays of it because that was.
I grew up watching the Honeymooners, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. Okay.
With Jackie Gleason and Art Carney.
Art Carney.
That was regular
you look
fare.
younger. You look younger than what you are.
Yeah, it's daily prayer, Alan. It'll help.
My father was an odd fellow. He was odd anyway, but it was the Jew. I think it was a Jewish men's group, an answer to the Masons or something. I don't know.
I'm not familiar with that. The Odd
It was
Fellows.
called Odd Fellows.
Wow, I'm not familiar. Okay, Arnie, you had.
Yeah, just one. Let me throw in because of the Shriners, which is one of the Masons Lodge. Produced the best for kids, the first and still probably the best burn centers for kids in the United States.
True.
Similarly, their hospitals for crippled children are second to none. I mean, they are the ultimate. And now they're being faced with diminishing membership. I mean, the kids are not becoming Shriners.
Yeah.
So they're really financially facing a crisis. I mean, unlike a lot of the Mason lodges that weren't absolutely committed in terms of things, they were philanthropic. But Shriners, I mean, they created these hospitals and everything else. They're fantastic.
No,
they got a big problem. Oh yeah, no, they're at least in my area, which was Burns, no question.
No, you're 100% correct, and they've done good work. I mean, the parallel to that is Hadassah, and this Jewish women's group, which we just celebrated this past Shabbat Zachor, and again, building hospitals and doing incredibly wonderful work. But their membership too is aging. But you never know. People make predictions. Oh, it's all going to go away. Things come back too. You never know. So I want to get to this passage now that's going to link what we just read about the garment to Achashverosh. And then we're going to get into just the first couple of verses of the book of Esther, which I think will be interesting. I find it interesting. Okay, here's from the Babylonian Talmud, Megillah 12a. Who would like to read a little bit of this? Where's my Talmud man? Arnie.
Happy to. Okay. Verse states, when he showed the riches of his glorious kavod, kingdom, and the honor of his majestic Tiferet greatness, Rabbi Yossi Bar Hanina said, this teaches that Achashverosh wore the priestly vestments. Proof for this assertion may be adduced from the fact that the same terms are written with regard to the priestly vestments as it is written here, the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his majestic greatness. And it is written there with regard to the priestly garments for glory, kavod, and for majesty, tiferet.
Right. So the Talmud linked already this week's Torah portion to the book of Esther. So believe me, I was not so clever as to come up with it on my own. But there were plenty of predecessors over 1800 years ago who thought of the same thing. So just looking at we're going to read just a few verses of Esther, and then we get to some of these passages of commentary, which I think is interesting. I highlighted, you can see here, Achashverosh hu. Now, that's going to be one of the comments that we have. Hu is simply mean he. So, Vayihi b'yamei Achashverosh hu Achashverosh hamolech mehodu ve'ad kush, that in the days of Achashverosh, he, or as that is the Achashverosh, the king of from Hodu to Kush. That phrase, Achashverosh hu Achashverosh, who simply, who means he, but it could also be that is. It's a reference to identifying him a little bit closer. So let's just read just 7 verses of the beginning of the book of Esther, which of course we will read on Thursday night. I've got some ringers. Susie, my Susan will chant this in Hebrew from a real Megillah, Esther. So if you tune in on Thursday at 6 o'clock, you'll be able to see the real Megillah, and she'll be chanting it. And my rabbinic student Shmuley, Sammy, will do from chapter 5. So who would like to read the very beginning of Esther, chapter 1 here? Barbara?
Yeah. It happened in the days of Ahasuerus that Ahasuerus, who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Nubia, in those days when King Ahasuerus occupied the royal throne in the fortress Shushan, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers, the administration of Persia and Media, the nobles and the governors of the provinces in his service. For no fewer than 180 days, he displayed the vast riches of his kingdom and the splendid glory of his majesty. At the end of this period, the king gave a banquet for 7 days in the court of the king's palace garden for all the people who lived in the fortress Shushan, high and low alike. There were hangings of white cotton and blue wool caught up by cords of fine linen and purple wool to silver rods and alabaster columns. And there were couches of gold and silver on a pavement of marble, alabaster, mother of pearl, and mosaics. Royal wine was served in abundance, as befits a king, in golden beakers of varied design.
Now, if you go through the rest of Tetzaveh and following, the attention to detail as to the designs of the costumes, and of course of the menorah, and of the other instruments and the vessels that'll be used in the temple, it sort of harkens back. And so that's why what we had earlier in the chapter of in the Talmud, they're saying, where did he get all this stuff? And some of it was used. Now, we're going to get to a very interesting tradition, and that is Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem about the year 586 before the Common Era. The prophet Jeremiah, who witnessed that, had prophesied that in 70 years we would return. And so the question was, when was that 70 years over? And there were some of the kings of Babylon, and then following it, Media and Persia, who had, even if they had had the inclination to use some of the holy vessels from the temple that they had captured, they thought it's probably tempting fate and some bad mojo if we do it before 70 years is over. So the question is, and this is the rabbis in the Talmud we'll get to, and you will see the comments. Some predicted that Achashverosh thought that the 70 years were over and he could use those vessels with impunity. So this is the section. This is from a little bit earlier in that passage in Megillat Esther, chapter Daf 11a. Who would like to read this from the Talmud?
I'll continue if you want.
Oh, please, thank you.
The Gemara continues with this explanation of the book of Esther, beginning with a discussion of the name Ahasuerus. Rav said, the name should be viewed as a contraction. The brother of the head.
Achiv shel Rosh, he's the brother of the head.
And of the same character as the head. Ben Gilo shel Rosh. Rav explains the brother of the head. For example, the brother of the wicked Nebuchadnezzar, who is called head, as it is stated, you are the head of gold. Of the same character as the head, for he, Nebuchadnezzar, killed the Jews, and he, Ahasuerus, sought to kill them. He destroyed the temple, and he sought to destroy the foundations for the temple laid by Zerubbabel, as it is stated. And in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote to him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem, and he ordered that the construction of the temple cease.
So they're comparing that Achashverosh is continuing the legacy of his brother, Nebuchadnezzar, who is, as one destroyed Jerusalem and killed Jews, Achashverosh tried to do the same thing. As one destroyed the temple, Achashverosh was going to stop the reconstruction of the temple. And we find this already in Ezra and Nehemiah. In the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, they're leading the exiles back to Jerusalem. And they have with them letters from Cyrus and Darius, who are saying Jews have the right to rebuild their temple. There was a new policy in place by the Persians that the people who had ancestral land holdings and traditions could go back, because the Persian policy was that they would be more secure and they would get more riches if the various peoples that they had conquered, or that they had now under their realm, because it was the Persians who conquered the Babylonians, if those captured people would go back to their homeland and set up their own semi-autonomous system, and that way they would be loyal to the Persian Empire and send back taxes. And so Jews, along with others, were allowed to go back. And so Ezra and Nehemiah detailed it, but they also said that as they were coming back to build then this new temple, this second temple, and the prophet Zerubbabel also details a little bit of it. There were those who tried to undermine that, and they would send back letters. And so Achashverosh was getting pushed and pulled. One, he had the direction from Cyrus. On the other hand, he had these push against those traditions. So there's a couple of Dariuses here. We have Darius, who is Achashverosh's father, but then we also have Darius, who is the son of Achashverosh. So it gets a little bit confusing as we go back and forth. So Achashverosh originally just wanted to stop the building. I'm sorry, let me get out of this. Barbara, go ahead.
So when Esther enters the scene, does Ahasuerus fall in love with her immediately, or?
He does, but he doesn't. So Achashverosh, we like to make him out to this harmless drunk. Jewish tradition did not think him as a harmless drunk, but rather he was a brutal and awful man who was certainly manipulated by people like Haman, but he had his own designs. He was not in favor of Jews. He was an absolute anti-Semite. Esther turned him around, which is also another story of redemption as well. That someone can evolve in their character. But the idea is, if you read on the story and you know the story, that Esther, he did fall in love with Esther, but he didn't fall in love with her because he was Jewish. She was Jewish. He didn't find that out until the denouement, the conclusion of the story. So let's get back to this passage. The Gemara continues then from this sentence. Well, this sort of gets in the same kind of thing. I think a little bit with Barbara, what you were saying. Ahasuerus was wicked, and he was thoroughly wicked from the beginning to end, although I think the rabbi is a little bit harsh here. So go ahead and read this little passage to the continues.
Okay, the Gemara continues. This is Ahasuerus.
Yeah, Ahasuerus, who Ahasuerus? That's when we were right at the very beginning.
Okay. The term who this is comes to teach that he remained as he was in his wickedness from beginning to end. Similarly, wherever the word this is appear in this manner, the verse indicates that the individual under discussion remained the same from beginning to end. For example, this is who Esau, he remained in his wickedness from beginning to end. This is who Dathan and Abiram, they remained in their wickedness from beginning to end. This is who the king Ahaz, he remained in his wickedness from beginning to end.
So they're maintaining here that Ahasuerus did not evolve in his character, but rather he was scared witless. Once he saw what had happened, that he realized that, you know what, I better go along. I think that's a little harsh. I'm going to go on. The thing goes on with, they say you could remain in your character both for the good and the bad. They say Moses and David, also who Aaron and Moshe and David as well. I want to get to this next section of Megillah 11b, in which it also details this banquet. So who would like to read a little bit of Megillah 11? Also from Talmud. Anybody? Go ahead, Jerry. Or Natalie, either one.
The second verse in Esther states, in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, implying that the events to follow took place during the first year of his reign. And one verse afterward, it is written, in the third year of his reign, Esther, indicating that it was the third year, not the first. Rava said, there is no contradiction. What is the meaning of when he sat? When he sat, it is intended to indicate that he acted not immediately upon his rise to the throne, but rather after his mind was settled. And he overcame his anxiety and worry with regard to the redemption of the Jewish people. He said to himself as follows, Belshazzar, the king of Babylonia, calculated and erred with regard to the Jewish people's redemption. I too will calculate, but I will not err. The Gemara explains, what is this calculation? As it is written with regard to Jeremiah's prophecy of a return to Eretz Israel, after 70 years are accomplished for Babylonia, I will remind you and perform my promise to you.
Remember you.
I will remember you and perform my promise to you, enabling you to return to this place. And elsewhere it is written in a slightly different formulation. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, meditated in the books over the number of the years, which the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish for the desolations of Jerusalem 70 years. Belshazzar, calculated as follows: 45 years of Nebuchadnezzar, and 23 of evil Merodach, and 2 of his own, for a total of 70 years that had passed without redemption. He was therefore certain that Jeremiah's prophecy would no longer be fulfilled, and he therefore said, I will take out the vessels of the holy temple and use them.
Then one last little section, Megillah 7. I want to stop here for just a second, okay? So the idea was that the Achashverosh, the garments, the vessels were being used only because he thought that the prophecy of Jeremiah had passed and it did not come true. Therefore, there was no longer any mojo, there was no longer any kibosh against him using it, and he could act with impunity. Because again, it was as if the light had been extinguished. It is as if God was no longer present. Just as Moses is not mentioned in Tetzaveh, just as we saw the Romans try to take away the Ner Tamid, the light, just as God is not mentioned in the book of Esther, so too Achashverosh said, I don't see it, therefore it's gone. It no longer has any significance. And the idea in the Torah, certainly within the book of Esther, is what you don't see doesn't necessarily mean the full picture, that there are those things that transcend our human sight and awareness. And obviously the plans that Achashverosh had and Haman had, they were turned upside down. Why is this this celebration on Thursday night? Why is it called Purim?
I don't know.
What's a Pur?
Dice, casting the dice.
So literally, it was we have a lottery, right? So they would remember, we have in the breastplate of the ephod and the ephod, they had the Urim and Thummim, 2 stones, oracular stones. Not exactly sure, we don't have the specific details about exactly how they were used, but it was probably, by most of the teachings, they said most probably it was in either a yes or no. I would take these stones and I would look at their configuration, maybe there was some lettering on it, and from that the priest or the prophet would look and see and say either yes or no. So I would have a question. I should go into battle, or I should not go into battle. I should have this project, or I should not. And so the question then was put forward to the priest. He would look at the oracular stone and would either say yes or no. The lots that were shaken and cast by Haman from day after day, literally for 365 days, he cast Pur, looking for a yes answer. Is this the day to push for the decree against the Jews, to kill all the Jews, to take everything that the Jews had in Persia and to wipe them out, right? So he was looking, as was common in those days, for some oracular support. And so he would cast the Pur. Now the answer is either yes or no. So what's the chance that you might get an answer one way or the other? What's the percentage?
50%.
Right? It's either yes or no. That's it. He cast day after day after day. And each time the answer was no. Right? And he kept tossing from the 14th day of Adar all the way for a whole year. 365 days of no. And he finally got the yes. And so again, God's presence is in the book of Esther, not Adonai Eloheinu, not written out in name, but the presence, the Spirit is certainly there as well. So because, you might say, oh, why was he going on? Why did I include the passage about the Achashverosh, who Achashverosh? Because as Barbara mentioned, there could be an evolution of character. It seemed that Achashverosh eventually embraced Esther as a Jew, certainly elevated Mordecai to be the viceroy, So at some point, you have to let go of the fact that he did not change his character. I think he most certainly changed his character, which gets us again to the tradition on Purim. It's not a nice tradition, and it's not one we teach our children early, but it's one that we know. What's one of those things that is a tradition on Purim?
Dressing up.
Well, dressing up, that's a fun, nice one.
Sending fruit of
Okay, I need someone to read this. Megillah 7b. Jerry, go ahead.
Rava said, a person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until he is so intoxicated that he does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai. The Gemara relates that Rabbah and Rabbi Zerah prepared a Purim feast with each other, and they became intoxicated to the point that Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rabbi Zerah. The next day, when he became sober and realized what he had done, Rabbah asked God for mercy and revived him. The next year, Rabbah said to Rabbi Zerah, "Let the master come and let us prepare for the Purim feast with each other." He said to him, "Miracles do not happen each and every hour, and I do not want to undergo that experience again."
Right. So he said, you know what, it got out of hand. Now, of course, the commentators on the Talmud say he didn't really kill him. What did he do? Maybe they were dancing and they wrestled and he passed out or something like that. Anyway, they had the worst hangover ever. Barbara.
The first time we were in Israel, we visited Mark's cousin who's Chabad, and he showed us a video of the family. They rent a hall out for like 60 members of the family for Purim, and they are forcing liquor into each other's, they're holding each other down and they're forcing liquor to them. I mean, it was the craziest thing I have ever seen in my life.
That's dangerous, all right? And that gets to, so you might say, why did the Gemara then say, well, there's a tradition of getting drunk. Why? Because when you have intoxications, your character does shift.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And some of the things that are hidden in your character, you might say, oh, this person's sort of stiff and proper. They get a couple of shots in this person, and all of a sudden some things come out and you go, whoa.
It was just the men who were doing it. And Mark's cousin had a Bozo the Clown hat on, and oh my God, I've never in my life expected to see anything of this nature, you know.
So that's why the Gemara said at the end, you know what, okay, there's a tradition of losing your inhibitions, letting that secret part out, right? And also being sarcastic, being satirical, not sarcastic, being satirical, making fun, especially of the leaders. There's a time in which in the yeshivot or in the temples, they would frequently make fun of the rabbis and other people. And it was all in good fun, but also there's always a little bit of kernel of truth in it. You get that out. You get that out, expose it, and make it a little bit less harmful. If you hold inside some of that, some bitterness, it can eat away. But if you get it out, you laugh at it, and you say, okay, we're just carrying on. But of course, the problem is if you have too much, and there's the danger. So they said, don't imbibe too much. Forcing liquor down people, not a good thing. Not a
New Year's Eve must be a blast.
Right. So anyway, listen, guys, unfortunately, I have to switch off to a funeral. Barbara Fink's mommy passed. I don't know if you guys know Barbara Fink. And so I'm going to shift over real quick to that. On Thursday, I remind you, Rabbi Jordy Kalman is going to be leading a lunch and learn. She does it this Thursday and the following Thursday. So I will see you this Thursday night, not at noon, but Thursday night for the Purim service at 6. Also, it's followed by a comedian at 7. It's going to be fun. Also at 11 o'clock, Wendy, if you guys could all get the word out. At 11 o'clock this Thursday, we do have our healing service.
Yeah.
So spread the word, and for people, if they come, share their message. It's a beautiful, 35, 40 minutes of prayer and sharing. And I hope that everyone will be able to participate. So Yoni, thank you again. You're always wonderful. Thank you guys for joining. And I look forward to seeing you guys Thursday for healing and later on as well. Natalie, anything else?
I just want to know what Alan has on his shirt. Alan Markman.
Oh, it says, life is better with Fisher. Fisher is my dog.
Oh, okay.
4 months ago.
I knew I liked you for a reason.
Very good. Very good. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks